Yo, what's poppin' everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Zach Lesage here. Today we're going to be covering over Dragapult EX, one of the best cards from Twilight Masquerade, and it gets even better with Shrouded Fable. How? Well, we get the new Dusknoir card, and Spread mixes with Spread quite well, and having the option to do some explosive turns is certainly going to take the tide of this deck. That being said, we will be covering over my updated deck list for Dragapult EX Dusknoir and some friends in this video, and going over every card individually. So if you want to learn something more about one of the best decks for Worlds 2024, be sure to stay tuned to the end of this video. Let's jump into it. Here is the list. The list is also available in the description. You can copy and paste it right into a Limitless Tabletop Simulator, any of the other available simulators. It's not available on TCG Live. If you're missing any of the cards for this deck, check out Kayfabe for physical cards that they'll ship anywhere in North America, and you can go to PTCGL store for some digital code cards to help build this deck online. Why is Dragapult very good? Well, being able to hit for 200 up active and 6 damage counters onto the bench is absolutely fantastic. And where we really can amplify that is having ways to search out cards with cards such as Pidgeot. You can search out whatever pieces you need. That Arvin can turn into a rare candy in a Forest Steel Stone. Get out all the pieces you need. Charizard works as a backup attacker, but it also is an energy acceleration method to accelerate energies to your Dragapult. And of course, we have the new Dusknoir, which can knock itself out during your turn and place up to 13 damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon. We got a few other goodies when it comes to this deck, but more or less we have a deck that can draw multiple prize cards in a turn if you strategically place your damage counters with Phantom Dive. And we have a few ways to amplify that throughout this deck as well. I think it's going to be one of the top picks for a lot of players at the 2024 World Championships. And it really kind of exemplifies how strong a card like Dusknoir actually can be. There's the Charizard, Pidgeot, Dusknoir, and there's the Dragapult, Dusknoir, Pidgeot, Charizard deck. Might be confusing, but they're two kind of separate archetypes. I feel like this build really is better for Dusknoir. I'm not sure if it's gonna be better overall, but it does really show what Dusknoir can do. I do want to kind of go over these cards individually to make sure that the deck is fully covered, so let's go see how that looks today. So starting things off, Dragapult EX is going to be the main attacker of our deck. We're not really looking at Jet Headbutt. We're only going to be using Jet Headbutt if we are behind in any capacity, like we miss an energy drop. We're really looking at it for Phantom Dive. And Phantom Dive doing 200 damage, 6 damage counters on your opponent's bench however you like, means that we have a lot of foresight into how we're going to be lining things up. You can hit 200 on the active, start planning for a knockout or a multi-prize card turn knockout. So if we're trying to knock out a Dragapult EX, Mirror in a couple turns, we can place 6 damage counters on a Drakloak. We can put 6 damage counters on the Dragapult when it evolves, and then we can hit for 200 to hit that perfect 320 damage. We have a few ways to make that a little bit better when it comes down to it. We have Defiance Band, and Defiance Band gives yourself the opportunity, if you're behind on prize cards, you can do additional 30. So if we have ways to scale this up, and that might be enough to knock out an opposing Pokemon such as Miraidon EX that has 220 HP. We have other ways when it comes to this deck by either using Dusclops or Dusknoir. They're both have the same Curse Bomb ability, and you can either put 5 damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon or 13 damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon. You then have the opportunity, you're knocking yourself out at that point, the Dusknoir, the Dusclops that is, your opponent draws a prize card, and that's what really opens up this deck up for its disruptive edge. We could activate that Defiance Band to increase plus 30 out of nowhere. We could activate an Iono so your opponent draws 1 less. We could activate one of our counter catchers to gust up whatever we want. We have the opportunity to force our opponent into a Roxanne that they were playing around. Shuffle their deck, they get to draw 2 cards. We have some cool ways to play around with Dragapult and set up these multi-prize card turns with Phantom Dive, whether we're setting up damage counters to knock out a big Pokemon, or we're setting up damage counters in a sinister way to maybe place damage counters with Phantom Dive on a few different Pokemon, play some damage counters with Dusknoir, and then maybe we play Technical Machine De-Evolution to de-evolve all your opponent's Pokemon. that really can set your opponent off, and you might be able to draw 3 prize cards. Your opponent has a board left of nothingness, maybe just a Manaphy and some other cards, really putting yourself as the true victor of the match. Drakloak is another card that's worth mentioning because we have its Recon Directive ability, which allows us to look at the top 2 cards of our deck and put one of them into our hand. Similar to the Gardevoir EX deck, we have built-in support where they have Kirlia, we have Drakloak, so getting those extra few cards per turn, if we ever have to evolve a Dreepy into a Drakloak, we certainly have the opportunity to draw some cards with Recon Directive, and maybe take a little bit of pressure if we miss the Pidgeot. Pidgeot EX is really played in most decks that play Rare Candy, the one exception being Chen Pao, because we can search out these cards and have these powerful supporters throughout the game. When it comes to a technical deck such as Dragapult or a technical deck such as Charizard, we need to be able to search out those damage modifiers, those counter catchers, those late game supporters to really make this deck count. Pidgeot EX is certainly going to be there to get everything going, and of course it has free retreat as well. Now, Charizard is more of a side piece to this deck. It's not the main focus, but it is a potential attacker with its Burning Darkness attack, or we can use Infernal Rain as a way to accelerate energies to a Dragapult, because unlike a Charizard EX deck, Dragapult takes 2 separate energies, a Fire and a Psychic. So we can either power that up with our A-Spec of choice here, which is Neo Upper Energy, which provides any 2 energies for a Stage 2 Pokemon, which Dragapult does meet that requirement. But we also have the opportunity to accelerate a Fire Energy to a Dragapult, and maybe a Fire Energy to a Charizard, so we're ready to go with either attacker at any point in the game. Like Dragapult, there's a lot of synergy with Charizard EX and Dusknoir because of its Burning Darkness attack. Being able to increase from 180 to 210 or in plus 30 at any point in the game when you pop a Dusclops or a Dusknoir gives you that opportunity to really scale damage in ways that your opponent could have never seen. They can't necessarily play around your Burning Darkness anymore, so you're the one who has complete control over your game as much as you have it. The Dusknoir line is really going to be what makes this deck happen, and we've gone over a few scenarios between disruption, increasing damage output, or even putting your opponent in a rough position with Iono. We could go over those cards quite a bit, but one thing that I do want to note is this build, since it plays Psychic Energy, can actually play the Duskull from Brilliant Stars. It's not the same as the new Duskull by any means, which can grab Duskulls out of play, but it's likely better to play the Perplex one to potentially confuse your opponent's active Pokemon. We've seen attacks like this at the NEIC finals against Andrew Hedrick and Stefan Ivanov, where confusion could have mattered and could have been the difference between first place or second place. Duskull might matter here, so if you haven't picked up a Brilliant Stars Duskull, I highly recommend looking through your bulk or going to your local game store, maybe Kayfabe Cards, if you can't find one, and picking it up. In true essence of this deck, traditional Dragapult, Pidgeot, Charizard lists would run 1-1 Bibarel line. We have the new Fezandipiti EX, which allows us to draw cards, up to 3 cards if one of our Pokemon were knocked out during our opponent's last turn. We cannot activate this with Dusknoir, but we do have the opportunity to draw 3 cards if something got knocked out, and it does give us that extra little bit of if we can get Pidgeot out, we can have Fezandipiti out kind of tactic. Rotom's a card that I added into this deck over Cleffa just because I was worried about Dusknoir and Dusclops being able to get a freebie prize card. And Lumineon's kind of a staple in this deck because if you have a dead hand, you could use this to get out Arven and basically get out whatever you need. Radiant Charizard still seems like it has a place in this deck, especially when we can scale up the damage with Dusknoir or Dusclops to really get that Combustion Blast over 300 damage, and being able to knock out things like Charizard and Dusknoir. And of course, with Lost Zone Box still being a threat in almost any given metagame, we gotta watch out for Radiant Greninja, so Manaphy helps us get past that as well. Our supporter line is really going to be Arven, which can search out Rare Candy for Sealstone, or whatever we really need, the missing pieces to our hand to kind of string this deck together. We have Iono, which is going to be a typical shuffle draw supporter, but it works out a little bit better now that we have control over everything. With Dusknoir, we have a copy of Boss's Orders, and we only have 1 boss because we have Palpad, but we also have double counter catcher as well for Gusting, because we can control if we're ahead on prize cards or not sometimes. Churro is going to help to get clear Pokemon out of play, such as Lumineon, Rotom, Fezandipiti when they become a liability, and we have the ability to activate Roxanne. Roxanne could be cut for an extra copy of Iono, depending on how things go, but I do think decks with Dusknoir should play to their full advantage, and since we can kind of pick this card out of the deck whenever we want, Roxanne does seem pretty worthwhile to pick at any given point. Buddy Puff and Ultra Ball, Rare Candy are going to be typical counts for pretty much any Stage 2 deck. We got to search out our basic Pokemon. Most of them have less than 70 HP. Ultra Ball can grab all those big pieces or whatever we're needing at any given point, and Rare Candy, I mean, when you have, what, 4 separate Stage 2 lines, you probably want to play 4 Rare Candies. This is a teched out deck. If any of your Pokemon fall, we do have Super Rod to kind of get back those energies whenever possible. And we also have Lost Vacuum, just in case our opponent has Stadium in play we don't want to see, a Pokemon tool in play, like a Hero's Cape. Like, there's a lot of cases where Lost Vacuum could be the glue that holds your opponent's strategy together. I think Lost Vacuum here is a worthwhile inclusion. But to me, it is actually probably one of the more cuttable decks or cards out of this deck to give it a try. With this many one-of cards or thin lines, I think Heavy Ball is actually really important. Maybe you need that key Duskull, maybe you need that key Charmander, the key Fezandipiti. Heavy Ball can really help you get to whatever you need. And one Nest Ball is to have an Arven searchable way to get out Fezandipiti or Rotom or any of your other Pokemon at any given point. Forest Steelstone can search out whatever you want when you slap it onto a Rotom or a Lumineon, really working with Arven to search things out. And Collapse Stadium can take off any of those Pokemon that you don't want in play, very similar to a Professor Turo. We're running a little bit late with the energy line, or a little thin. 3 Fire, 2 Psychic, 1 Neo Upper. Charizard EX decks typically run 6 energies. I don't really see how Dragapult EX is any different, especially when we have Neo Upper Energy that can power it up in one go. And of course, that card is quick searchable or Forest Steelstone searchable at any given point to make it happen. Dragapult might look like a mess of a deck list, and it really kind of seems like one of those decks that if it's the first time you're going to League, you drop your binder and you put it all together in sleeves and you're like, I'm ready to go. It's a lot more cohesive than that, and it's a lot more well thought out. So give it a try. I do want to give a shout out to my friend Nora. She actually suggested maybe adding a second Duskull. It's something that I've thought a lot about in the past couple days. So as you experiment with this deck, feel free to add a second Duskull, a second Charmander, and play around with your counts a little bit. I could even see this deck cutting a Dragapult EX, so if you only have 2 of those cards, it might be worthwhile to run 2 and then go add another Duskull. We certainly have opportunities to play this deck however we like and configure it. It doesn't necessarily have to be perfect day one, and of course it can adapt to the metagame. Want to support the Shuffle Squad? Be sure to check out all of our sponsors in the description to pick up Pokemon TCG singles, sealed, and PTCG live codes. You made it to the end. Thank you so much for watching this entire video from the Shuffle Squad. Honestly, from the bottom of our hearts, we appreciate each and every person that supports our content, watches what we have going on every single day, every single week, even from time to time, and continuously allows us to have a forum to project our creative content towards the Pokemon TCG community. So if you haven't already, be sure to give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and even leave a comment to help boost the YouTube algorithm. That being said, we'll catch you with our next video. Thanks again. Take it easy.